ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Namaste, my dear friends. This is second video on the topic of pain and sorrow, how we feel pain and sorrow biologically, how pain and sorrow can be eliminated with the help of Advaita Vedanta sadhanas, and living examples of Hindu sages who did not experience pain and sorrow as they were self-realized. Now let us discuss why a self-realized person does not feel pain and sorrow. Illusion of individuality and recognizes their true nature as identical to the ultimate reality Brahma. In this state of realization, the individual no longer identifies with the body, mind, or ego. As a result, they do not experience pain and sorrow in the same way an ordinary person does. Here are a few reasons why a self realized person may not feel pain and sorrow in the conventional sense. 1. Transcendence of ego. Self realization involves the dissolution of the ego, the sense of individual identity. Pain and sorrow often arises from the ego's attachment to specific experiences or outcomes. When the ego is transcended, there is no personal identification with pain or sorrow, leading to a state of equanimity. True understanding the illusory nature of the world. A self realized person understands that the world and all its experiences are ultimately illusory, Maya. They perceive the transient nature of pleasure and pain and do not get emotionally entangled in them. Their perspective on the world is one of detachment and non attachment. 3. Realization of non duality. In the state of realization, self realization, one realizes the non dual nature of reality. There is no separation between the self and the external world, and there is no other to cause pain and sorrow. Everything is perceived as a manifestation of the same underlying reality, Brahma. 4. Eternal bliss, Ananda. Self realization is often described as the experience of eternal bliss, Ananda. In this state, there is a continuous sense of joy and contentment that transcends external circumstances. Any external events, including pain and sorrow, do not disturb this inner bliss. 5. Absence of desire. Pain and sorrow often arise from unfulfilled desires and attachments. A self realized person has transcended desires as they have realized their ultimate fulfillment in the awareness of their true nature. Without desires, there is no basis for experiencing pain or sorrow related to unmet expectations. It's important to note that the state of self realization is profound and rare. Not all spiritual experiences or moments of insight equate to full self realization as understood in Advaita Vedanta. Individuals along their spiritual paths may have glimpses of these truths, but complete liberation from the cycle of suffering is the hallmark of a self realized being in the Advaita tradition. Freedom from dualities. A self realized person transcends dualities such as pleasure and pain, gain and loss, success and failure. They have a deep understanding that these dualities are inherent in the realm of relativity and do not affect their true nature. Consequently, they remain undisturbed by life's ups and downs. 7. Absence of mental agitations. Ordinary individuals experience mental agitations due to desires, fears, and attachments. A self realized person having transcended desires and attachments experiences a state of mental tranquility. Without the turbulence of the mind, there is no space for sorrow or emotional pain to arise. 8. Living in the present moment. Sorrow often arises from dwelling on past regrets or fearing the future. A self realized individual lives fully in the present moment, free from the burden of past and future. Their awareness is rooted in the eternal now, where there is no room for regret or anxiety. 9. Unconditional love and compassion. Self realized beings often exhibit boundless love and compassion for all living beings. Their love is not dependent on external circumstances or the behavior of others. This unconditional love and compassion create a sense of interconnectedness and reduce the likelihood of experiencing pain or sorrow related to interpersonal conflicts or misunderstandings. 10. Detached involvement. A self realized person remains engaged in the world, fulfilling their duties and responsibilities with utmost dedication, yet they are completely detached from the outcomes of their actions. This detachment ensures that they do not experience sorrow in success or failure as they recognize both as passing phenomena. 11. Supreme contentment. Self realization brings a profound sense of contentment and fulfillment that is not dependent on external achievements or possessions. This inner contentment leaves no space for craving or dissatisfaction, eliminating the root causes of sorrow. 12. Transcendence of individuality. A self realized person understands that individuality is a temporary construct and not the ultimate truth. They recognize themselves as the universal consciousness, Brahma, expressing itself through a temporary individual form. In this realization, there is no room for personal sorrow or pain as there is no personal self to experience it. In summary, a self realized person does not feel pain and sorrow in the same way as ordinary individuals because they have transcended the ego, dualities, desires, and attachments. Their awareness is rooted in the eternal, unchanging reality, leading to a state of perpetual bliss, tranquility, and unconditional love. 13. Egolessness and humility. A self realized person has completely transcended the ego, which is the source of individuality, identity, and pride. In the absence of ego, there is no sense of superiority or inferiority, leading to profound humility. Humility allows them to accept all situations with equanimity without feelings of insult or injury. And 14. Understanding the interconnectedness of all beings. A self-realized individual perceives the interconnectedness of all living beings at a profound level. They recognize that the same consciousness animates all forms of life. This understanding leads to a deep sense of empathy and compassion, reducing the likelihood of experiencing pain or sorrow when witnessing the suffering of others. 15. Acceptance of impermanence. A self realized person fully understands the impermanent nature of the world. They accept change as an inherent part of life and do not resist it. Consequently, they do not experience sorrow when faced with loss, be it the loss of material possessions, relationships, or even the physical body. 16. Samadhi and transcendental states. Self realized beings often experience states of deep absorption and bliss known as samadhi. In these states, the individual consciousness merges with the universal consciousness, leading to a complete cessation of individuality. In such states, there is no scope for any form of pain or sorrow. 17. Compassion detachment. A self realized person is compassionate yet detached. They engage with the world, addressing the needs of others and alleviating suffering whenever possible. However, their actions are motivated by compassion, not attachment. This compassion detachment ensures that their mental and emotional well being remains untouched by external circumstances. 18. Grace and divine protection. In some spiritual traditions, it is believed that a self realized being is under the divine protection and grace. This protection shields them from unnecessary pain and suffering, allowing them to navigate life's challenges with grace and ease. 19. Purification of mind. Through years of spiritual practice, a self realized person has purified their mind of negative emotions and tendencies. The purified mind is not easily disturbed by external events, ensuring a state of inner peace and serenity. 20. Living in oneness. A self realized individual lives in a constant awareness of oneness with the universe. This awareness negates any sense of separation or alienation, leading to a state of profound peace where pain and sorrow finds no foothold. It is important to note that the experience of a self-realized being is beyond the grasp of ordinary human understanding. Their state of consciousness is often described as ineffable, transcending the limitations of language and conceptualization. As a result, attempts to describe their experience, including the absence of pain and sorrow, can only provide glimpses of the profound peace and bliss that characterize their existence. Are mind and ego cause of pain and sorrow? In many spiritual and philosophical traditions, including Advaita Vedanta, the mind and ego are indeed considered significant sources of pain and sorrow. Here is how these aspects are generally understood in causing suffering. 1. Ego ahankara. The ego or ahankara is the sense of individual identity and self importance. It is the feeling of I and mine. The ego creates a sense of separateness from others and the world, leading to desires, attachments, and a constant need for validation and security. When desires are unfulfilled or when there is a threat to the ego's identity, it can lead to emotional pain, disappointment, and suffering. 2. Mind manas. The mind encompasses thoughts, emotions, memories, and the faculty of reasoning. When the mind is constantly agitated, dwelling on past regrets or worrying about the future, it can lead to mental anguish. Negative thought patterns such as fear, anger, and resentment can create emotional pain and suffering. The mind's tendency to cling to pleasant experiences and reject unpleasant ones also contribute to sorrow. In the context of Advaita Vedanta and other non dual philosophies, the identification with the mind and ego as the true self Atma is seen as the root cause of suffering. This identification leads to a cycle of desires, attachments, and aversions, which in turn result in pain and sorrow. When the ego is transcended and the mind is purified through spiritual practice and self realization, the individual can experience liberation from this cycle of suffering. Practices such as self inquiry, meditation, and mindfulness are aimed at understanding the nature of the mind and ego, leading to their transcendence. By realizing the illusory nature of the ego and quieting the fluctuations of the mind, individuals can attain a state of inner peace and freedom from pain and sorrow according to these spiritual traditions. 3. Attachment and desire. Attachment to specific outcomes and desires for things to be a certain way can lead to suffering. When individuals are attached to people, possessions, or particular life circumstances, the fear of losing them or not attaining them can cause emotional pain. The ego often identifies with these attachments, and when they are threatened or unfulfilled, it can result in sorrow. 4. Fear and anxiety. The mind, driven by the ego's need for self preservation, often experiences fear and anxiety about the unknown, future events, or potential threats. These negative emotions can create mental and emotional suffering, leading to feelings of distress and apprehension. 5. Comparisons and judgments. The mind tends to compare situations, experiences, and oneself with others. Constant comparisons and judgments can lead to feelings of inadequacy, jealousy, and resentment, causing mental anguish and sorrow. The ego often reinforces these comparisons by seeking validation and superiority over others. 6. Guilt and regret. The mind can dwell on past actions and decisions, leading to feelings of guilt and regret. These negative emotions can cause significant psychological pain. The ego identifies with past mistakes and uses them to create a sense of unworthiness or self blame, resulting in ongoing suffering. 7. Illusions of control. The ego often believes it can control external circumstances and people. When situations do not unfold as expected, frustration and suffering can arise. The ego's illusion of control leads to resistance against the natural flow of life, causing emotional distress when things do not go as planned. 8. Identification with thoughts. The mind constantly generates thoughts, some of which can be negative or self critical. When individuals identify with these thoughts and believe them to be true reflections of their identity, it can lead to feelings of low self worth and sorrow. Recognizing that thoughts are transient and not the true self is crucial in overcoming this form of suffering. 9. Resistance to the present moment. When the mind resists the present moment and longs for a different reality, it creates inner conflict. Accepting the present moment as it is without resistance is a fundamental teaching in many spiritual traditions. Resistance to what is happening, how can cause mental and emotional anguish leading to sorrow. In spiritual and psychological practices, cultivating mindfulness, self awareness, and detachment from the mind's fluctuations and the ego's attachments are essential steps in overcoming the suffering caused by these factors. By understanding the nature of the mind and ego, individuals can develop resilience, inner peace, and a deeper sense of contentment regardless of external circumstances. Can pain and sorrow be eliminated by destruction of mind and ego? The destruction or dissolution of the mind and ego, as understood in many spiritual traditions, including Advaita Vedanta, does indeed lead to liberation from the experience of pain and sorrow. Here is why: 1. Transcending dualities. The mind and ego perceive the world in terms of dualities: good and bad, pleasure and pain, success and failure. When the mind and ego are dissolved, the individual transcends these dualities and experiences a state of equanimity. In this state, there is no preference for pleasure over pain, leading to freedom from emotional ups and downs. 2. Freedom from desires and attachments. The mind and ego are closely tied to desires and attachments. When the mind is quieted and the ego is transcended, desires lose their power. The individual no longer craves specific outcomes, material possessions, or validation from others. Without desires and attachments, there is no basis for experiencing pain related to unfulfilled desires or loss. 3. Absence of identification. Pain and sorrow often arise from identifying with the body, mind, and ego. When this identification is dissolved, there is no personal self to experience suffering. The individual realizes their true nature as the unchanging consciousness, Atma or Brahma, beyond the transient aspects of existence. Without the sense of a separate self, there is no one to undergo pain or sorrow. For living in the present moment, the mind tends to dwell on the past or worry about the future, leading to mental anguish. When the mind is still, the individual resides fully in the present moment. In the present, there is no regret about the past or fear about the future, eliminating a significant source of sorrow. 5. Mindful awareness. Dissolution of the mind and ego often leads to a state of mindful awareness. In this state, the individual observes thoughts, emotions, and external events without being entangled in them. Mindful awareness allows for a non reactive and peaceful response to life's challenges, reducing the intensity of emotional pain. 6. Unity consciousness. Transcending the ego leads to the realization of unity consciousness, where the individual recognizes their interconnectedness with all of existence. In this state, there is no separation between oneself and the world, leading to a profound sense of love, compassion, and joy. Unity consciousness erases the boundaries that cause emotional suffering. It is important to note that the dissolution of the mind and ego is not a form of annihilation but a profound transformation of consciousness. This transformation results in a state of liberation where the individual experiences unshakable peace, bliss, and freedom from all forms of suffering, including pain and sorrow. Different spiritual paths and practices offer methods to attain this state of consciousness, emphasizing meditation, self inquiry, and contemplative techniques. 7. Witnessing consciousness. The dissolution of the ego and mind often leads to the experience of witnessing consciousness. In this state, an individual becomes a silent observer of their thoughts, emotions, and sensations without getting entangled in them. By becoming a witness to their own experience, there they maintain a sense of detachment which prevents the escalation of mental and emotional suffering. 8. Emotional detoxi- detoxification. When the mind and ego are dissolved, repressed emotions and traumas are often released. This process can lead to emotional healing and a profound sense of relief. By letting go of emotional baggage, individuals experience a lightness of being and freedom from the burden of past pain and sorrow. 9. Understanding impermanence. The dissolution of the ego includes recognizing the impermanent nature of all things. With this understanding, individuals no longer cling to transient experience or resist change. Acceptance of the impermanent nature of life reduces the impact of loss and disappointment, leading to a decrease in sorrowful experiences. 10. Renunciation of the doer mentality. The ego often identifies itself as the doer of actions and takes responsibility for outcomes. When the ego is dissolved, the individual understands that all actions are a part of the natural flow of the universe. This realization leads to a sense of surrender and acceptance, reducing the feelings of frustration and sorrow associated with unmet expectations or perceived failures. 11. Elimination of self-referential thoughts. The mind driven by the ego constantly generates self-referential thoughts which contribute to a sense of self-importance and individuality. When these self-referential thoughts diminish or disappear, the individual experiences a state of egolessness where there is no personal identity to experience pain and sorrow. 12. Living in alignment with universal order. With the dissolution of the ego, individuals often find themselves living in harmony with the natural order of the universe. Their actions are guided by wisdom and compassion, aligning with the greater good. Living in alignment with universal principles reduces inner conflict and leads to a sense of purpose and fulfillment. 13. Integration of shadow aspects. The dissolution of the ego can involve integrating the shadow self, the unconscious aspects of the psyche that are often repressed. By embracing and integrating these shadow aspects, individuals experience emotional integration and healing, leading to a reduction in inner turmoil and sorrow. 14. Realization of wholeness. Through dissolution of the ego and mind, individuals realize their inherent wholeness and completeness. This realization diminishes the sense of lack or inadequacy, which are often sources of emotional pain and sorrow. It is important to note that the process of dissolving the mind and ego is a profound and transformative journey that often requires dedicated spiritual practice, self inquiry, and guidance from a qualified teacher. Different spiritual traditions offer various methods to facilitate this dissolution, each emphasizing the importance of inner exploration and self realization. How mind and ego can be destroyed according to Advaita Vedanta. In Advaita Vedanta, the dissolution or transcendence of the mind and ego is a fundamental aspect of spiritual realization. According to this philosophy, the mind and ego are products of ignorance, avidya, and identification with them leads to cycle of birth and death, samsara, and experience of suffering. Here are some key concepts and practices in Advaita Vedanta that leads to the dissolution of the mind and ego. 1. Self-inquiry, Atma Vichara. Self-inquiry is a fundamental practice in Advaita Vedanta. Practitioners are encouraged to ask the question, who am I? And deeply investigate the nature of the self. Through rigorous self examination and contemplation, one can discern the distinction between the eternal self Atma and the temporary aspects of the mind and ego. By realizing the true self as distinct from the ego, the identification with the ego diminishes. 2. Discrimination, Viveka. Discrimination between the eternal and the impermanent is crucial in Advaita Vedanta. Practitioners learn to discern between the unchanging reality, Brahma, and the ever changing phenomena of the mind and ego. By understanding that the mind and ego are transient and illusory, one can gradually detach from them. 3. Detachment Vairagya. Detachment involves cultivating a sense of dispassion towards the transient aspects of life, including the mind and ego. Practitioners learn to observe thoughts, emotions, and experiences without getting entangled in them. Through detachment, one can reduce the influence of the ego and gain a broader perspective on life. 4. Meditation and contemplation. Regular meditation and contemplation practices help calm the fluctuations of the mind. By entering states of deep concentration and inner stillness, practitioners can experience moments of egolessness. These experiences provide glimpses of the true nature of the self beyond the mind and ego. 5. Study of sacred text. Studying the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and other Advaitic texts under the guidance of a qualified teacher is essential. These texts provide profound philosophical insights and teachings on the nature of reality, the self, and the mind. Studying and reflecting on these texts can lead to a shift in one's understanding, weakening the grip of the ego. 6. Satsang, association with truth. Satsang refers to the company of enlightened beings or spiritual teachers. Being in the presence of realized individuals can have a transformative impact. Their presence and teachings often help aspirants experience a shift in consciousness, aiding in the dissolution of the ego. 7. Grace, Guru Kripa. In Advaita Vedanta, grace is considered a powerful force that can lead to spiritual awakening. Devotees believe that the grace of the Guru or the Divine can remove the ignorance and ego, leading to self realization. It is important to note that the dissolution of the mind and ego is a gradual and transformative process that requires dedication, self discipline, and sincere spiritual practice. It often happens over time with consistent effort, guided by the teachings of enlightened masters and the aspirants' own direct experience and realization. 1. Self surrender. Prapatti. Surrendering the ego and mind to a higher power or the divine is a central theme in Advaita Vedanta. By relinquishing the sense of personal doership and trusting in the cosmic intelligence or Guru, practitioners let go of the ego's control. Surrender is not a passive act but an active acceptance of divine will over individual desires, leading to ego dissolution. 2. Neti neti, not this, not this. The method of neti neti or not this, not this involves negating all that is transient and impermanent. Practitioners systematically analyze their experiences, thoughts, emotions, and even the ego, recognizing them as objects of awareness rather than the true self. By negating all that is observable, practitioners realize the unchanging observer, the true self. 3. Jnana Yoga, path of knowledge. Jnana Yoga is the path of knowledge and wisdom. Through the study of scriptures, contemplation, and philosophical inquiry, practitioners develop a deep understanding of the nature of reality, the self, and the mind. This knowledge leads to the dissolution of ignorance, weakening the hold of the ego and mind. 4. Ajatvada doctrine of non-origination. Ajatvada asserts that the world was never created. It always exists in a state of non-origination. Recognizing the illusory nature of creation, practitioners understand that the mind's creations, including the ego, are also part of this illusory reality. Realization of non-origination leads to the dissolution of the egoic identity. 5. Silence, Mona. Silence is considered a powerful practice in Advaita Vedanta. By observing silence and mind's constant chatter is stilled in the absence of verbal and mental noise, practitioners experience a deep sense of awareness and can directly perceive the silent presence beyond the mind and ego. 6. Integration of Karma Yoga, path of selfless action. Karma Yoga emphasizes selfless service without attachment to the results of actions. By engaging in actions for the benefit of others and dedicating the results to a higher power, practitioners cultivate detachment from the fruits of their actions. This detachment weakens the ego's desire and attachments, facilitating its dissolution. 7. Purification of Chitta, Shuddhi. Purification of the mind is crucial in Advaita Vedanta. Through practices like meditation, prayer, and self reflection, practitioners purify the mind from negative thoughts patterns, desires, and attachments. A purified mind is more receptive to spiritual truths and less prone to the ego's influence. 8. Direct experience, Anubhava. Advaita Vedanta emphasizes direct experiential knowledge over intellectual understanding. Through meditation and contemplation, practitioners may have direct experience of egolessness and non duality. These experiences provide profound insights, weakening the ego's hold and facilitating its dissolution. It's essential to note that the dissolution of the mind and ego is a nuanced and multifaceted process that can vary for each individual. The practices and teachings in Advaita Vedanta provide a holistic approach, guiding seekers toward the direct realization of their true nature beyond the limitations of the mind and ego. 1. 1. Contemplation of unity, Aham Brahmasmi. The contemplation of Mahavakya, great saying Aham Brahmasmi, meaning I am Brahma, is a profound practice in Advaita Vedanta. By meditating on this truth, practitioners dissolve the sense of individuality and realize their oneness with the ultimate reality Brahma. This practice helps weaken the ego's hold on the individual identity. 2. Annihilation of vasanas. Vasanas are the latent impressions or tendencies in the mind that influence thoughts and actions. Advaita Vedanta teaches the annihilation of vasanas through self discipline, meditation, and selfless service. By eradicating these deep rooted tendencies, practitioners free themselves from the ego's compulsions and conditioning. 3. Mindfulness and awareness. Practicing mindfulness and cultivating awareness in every moment help individuals observe the activities of the mind objectively. By being aware of thoughts, emotions, and reactions as they arise, individuals develop distance from the mind's fluctuations. This awareness weakens the identification with the egoic mind. 4. Sankalpa and Vichara. Sankalpa is a resolution and Vichara is inquiry. Practitioners in Advaita Vedanta use resolutions and self inquiry to penetrate the layers of the mind and ego. By questioning the nature of reality and the self, individuals construct the ego's illusions and arrive at the understanding of non duality. 5. Yoga and Pranayama. The practice of yoga, postures, asanas, and breath control. Pranayama purifies the body and mind. A purified body and calm mind are conducive to deep meditation and self inquiry. Regular yoga and pranayama practices prepare the ground for the dissolution of the ego by calming the restless mind. Gratitude and surrender. Practicing gratitude and surrender to the divine are powerful methods in Advaita Vedanta. By cultivating gratitude for every experience and surrendering the ego's sense of control to a higher power, individuals acknowledge the interconnectedness of all things and weaken the ego's dominance. 7. Nidhi Dhyasana, deep contemplation. Nidhi Dhyasana is the practice of deep contemplation on the teachings of Advaita Vedanta. By immersing oneself in the profound truth of non duality, practitioners reinforce their understanding and weaken the ego's grip on the mind. Regular contemplation leads to the direct experience of the self beyond the ego. 8. Integration of bhakti, devotion, and jnana knowledge. Bhakti and jnana are two paths in Advaita Vedanta. Bhakti emphasizes love and devotion to the divine, whereas jnana focuses on knowledge and wisdom. Integrating these paths, practitioners balance the heart and intellect, leading to a harmonious dissolution of the ego through love, wisdom, and devotion. It is important to note that these practices are often interwoven and personalized according to the aspirant's temperament and readiness. The guidance of a qualified guru is invaluable in Advaita Vedanta as the guru tailors the practices to the specific needs of the disciple, leading them on the path toward the dissolution of mind and ego and realization of the ultimate truth. At this point, I conclude this video and the topic will continue in the third video. Thank you for watching this video. Namaskar, my dear friends. Thank you. Namaskar.